Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. So I'll chant a little bit and then continue hearing about Prabhupada and his struggles to serve his spiritual master, basically. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada, he's the touchdown man. He gets it done. He crosses the goal line. He gets it done. The ball got tossed to him and he ran with it. Touchdown. He's the home run king. Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. So we get to hear about how he got to cross the goal line. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Everybody sits and they watch these sports events, like football. Not soccer, but I'm not familiar with soccer. But in this country, it's football. And whoever has the ball, everybody's either trying to help them as a team or is attacking them so they can't reach the goal. So Prabhupada's the touchdown man. He got ball tossed to him and he ran with it. He didn't get a whole lot of support, but he sure did get a whole lot of trying to stop him. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna. Krishna. So it's 6 volumes. This is the first volume before Prabhupada leaves India. It starts when he was born, his mother and father, his childhood, and then his education, and then his involvement in politics, and his marriage, and then his meeting Bhaktivedanta, and then his struggles with his business. He's about to go bankrupt here. And he's being set up. It's a setup. It's a setup for freeing him completely from material distractions. He's getting everything taken away. Everything. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And that's why some people don't want to surrender to Krishna, because they understand one thing Krishna might do if you really want to surrender to the Lord is he might take everything away. He doesn't do it to be mean. He may do it to help the devotee, so all they have is Krishna. Then again, sometimes a devotee may have all kinds of facilities, be active in all sorts of spheres of activity, but it's not distracting them from Krishna. So it can go both ways. Hare Krishna, Hare. The main thing is just to remember Krishna. That's why the pure devotees, they pray, whatever condition of life I'm in, whatever it is, doesn't matter even what planet I end up on, I just want to remember you, and I want to glorify you, and I never want to forget my relationship with you, and to engage in service. What was it, Bhaktivedanta Thakur prayed? If I have to take birth as an insect, let it be in the house of a devotee. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. I was thinking about that. Usually I hear what devotees do if there's, some insect in the house and shouldn't be in the house. They'll try to maybe put a little cup over it and slide a piece of paper under the cup and then throw them outside. That kind of thing. They don't just it's an insect, step on it. They don't do that. They try to put them outside. So initially when I heard Bhaktivedanta Thakur said that I want to be an insect in the house of the devotee, I thought like that. But now I'm thinking, you step on insects without even realizing it, or accidentally something in the insect is killed. But the devotee in a devotional household, they're engaged in serving Krishna. They're engaged in transcendental meditation on a relationship with the Supreme Being. So even if they do accidentally step on the insect or put a hot plate down on top of them by mistake, there was prasadam in the plate, and it's the foot of a devotee. So I'm thinking it's more like that than just he'll spare me and put me outside. I'm thinking, if I get crushed by a devotee, that's all right. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I just want to remember the Lord. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So 16 a day keeps Maya away. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Is it an apple a day keeps the doctor away? Yeah. Hare Krishna, Hare 16 a day keeps Maya away. I don't know about everybody else, but it's really difficult to do. When you're living outside. I don't work now, but I have things I have to do. I'm retired. I live really simply on a few pennies here and there, but it's workable. As a student in the ashram, you're doing what everybody else is doing. You're right at 3 o'clock in the morning, the cold shower, you go in the temple room, and Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, you got 16 done before breakfast. But, you're in your 70s, and if you can get out of bed at all, you're doing pretty good. You wake up and I'm still alive. Okay, another day. So to get 16 done like that without getting distracted, and it's a big challenge, at least for me. And what to speak of, you don't have to be old. Younger devotees, they have families and children want attention all the time. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. I have to be engaged, and Hare Rama, Hare Rama. So you've got your own mind to deal with, and then you've got a child. Hare Krishna, very challenging to get the 16 done. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. But it's the only thing that Prabhupada asked his disciples. Every one of his disciples, he asked 16 rounds and 4 regulative principles. That's the only thing he asked everyone. And he made special requests of others that had different talents and abilities. But that's the 2 things Prabhupada asked his disciples. Whatever else you might do is 16 rounds and 4 regulative principles. So it's a relationship with Prabhupada. It's not just a rule or some burdensome regulation that now I'm Krishna conscious, I don't need those regulations. No, it's not like that. It's a relationship. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. He asked me to do this. Whatever else I might be able to do or not do, those are the 2 things he asked. Hare Krishna, of all his disciples. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. So I try to see how to arrange my life so that I can do that. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, and not just mechanically, but actually hearing Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. It's prime benediction for humanity at large. Hare Krishna, Hare. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Who is that I that is to be known? It's Krishna. And Krishna is not different from his name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. This is powerful stuff, you know. We tend to become a little familiar with Krishna consciousness. But this is really, really, Hare Krishna. Wow. You don't have to be like a big this or a big that. It's okay. It can be a little chipmunk, like Hanuman's little chipmunk. When Hanuman was taking the mountain peaks to help build the bridge to Lanka, and the little chipmunk was there with his grains of sand. It's all right. The Lord says, I'm accepting the service of the big Hanuman as well as the little chipmunk. It's all right. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. All right, so let's read a little bit here, continuing on with Prabhupada Lilamrta. Thank you so much, Satsvarupa Maharaj. I'm looking at this biography that you've done in 6 volumes. It's written so nicely, and it really gives us a nice picture of Prabhupada's activities. It's written so nicely. I'm actually amazed how you were able to do it, but you did. Hare Krishna. In 1948, Abai closed his Lucknow factory. He'd fallen behind in employees' salaries, and since 1946 had been paying past rent in installments. But when sales dropped off, continuing the factory became impossible. He lost everything. Not only that, he had worked for years in every spare moment to do the Gita-upanishad. It was to be a monumental work, 1,200 pages, 3 volumes, making devotional service to Krishna accessible, giving knowledge to people. And it was stolen. It was the only copy. Right when a very wealthy businessman was stepping forward to help get it printed. He was going to help Prabhupada print it. Gone. Now the business is gone. Srila Prabhupada says, I started a big laboratory in Lucknow. Those were golden days. My business flourished like anything. Everyone in the chemical business knew. But then, gradually, everything dwindled. So the biographer continues, with the help of some acquaintances in Allahabad, he opened a small factory there, in the same city where his Prayag pharmacy had failed 15 years before. He moved to Allahabad with his son, Vrindavan, and continued manufacturing medicines. While the rest of the family remained at Banerjee Lane in Calcutta, Abai continued his traveling, but now he was often away for months at a time. And then he had a dream, a second time. Bhaktisiddhanta had appeared to him years before, telling him in a dream, take sannyas. And now here's Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati appeared before him again. He was beckoning, indicating Abai should take sannyas. And again, Abai had to put the dream aside. He was a householder with many responsibilities. To take sannyas would mean to give up everything. He had to earn money. He now had 5 children. Why is Guru Maharaj asking me to take sannyas, he thought. It's not possible now. Prabhupada had 5 children. The Allahabad business was unsuccessful. At present, the condition of our business is not very good, he wrote his servant Garanga, who had asked to rejoin him. When the condition gets better and you are free, at that time I will call you. He worked earnestly, but results were meager. As with everything else, Abai saw his present circumstances through the eyes of Scripture, and he could not help but think of the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. Yasyaham anu grinami harishye taddanam sanai tato danam jadyantyasya swajana dukadukitam. Translation: when I feel especially merciful towards someone, I gradually take away all his material possessions. His friends and relatives then reject this poverty-stricken and most wretched fellow. When it's described, when Abai first heard that verse, he was really overwhelmed by it. And now he thinks of it often. He had heard Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati quote the verse, and now he thought of it often. He took it that his present circumstances were controlled by Lord Krishna, who was forcing him into a helpless position, freeing him for preaching Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada says, somehow or other, my intention for preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu increased. And the other side decreased. I was not disinclined, but Krishna forced me. You must give it up. The history is known how it decreased, decreased, and decreased. Allergies are causing some problem. That's a little allergy for allergies, a kind of herbal tea for allergies. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Queen Kunti had also prayed, "My dear Lord Krishna, your lordship can easily be approached, but only those who are materially exhausted. One who is on the path of material progress, trying to improve himself with respectable parentage, great opulence, high education, bodily beauty, cannot approach you with sincere feeling." Srila Prabhupada says, so in 1950, I retired, practically. Not retired, a little in touch with business, whatever's going on. Then almost it became nil. Whatever was there, all right, you do whatever you like. Do whatever you want. So 1950, when was Prabhupada born? How old was Prabhupada? Well, he left at the age of 81 in 1978, and 50 from 78 is 20, it's 38. Wait a minute, I got it. Yeah, 50 from 78 is 28. And he was 81, so 28 from 81, 53, something like that. He's very young. Abai's wife independently moved, along with her sons, back to her father's house at 72 Mahatma Gandhi Road. She had reasoned that her financial support was becoming precarious. Abai was spending most of his time away from home. He was gradually dissociating himself from the family. When after several months he would meet his wife and children, his father-in-law would criticize him. "You're always going outside. You're always worshiping God. You're not looking after your family." Whenever he could, Abai would send his family some money. And this is an account from Abai's nephew, Mr. Sudhir Kumar Datta. So Prabhupada's nephew says, "I sometimes noticed how he was thinking so many things, about his family, about writing, about making bigger and bigger in business. What to do, what to do. He was thinking seriously to earn more money from his business. But that means he has to give more time for his business, and his writing he'd never give up. He was writing more and more, and people sometimes abused him. 'Hey, you are writing religious things. You're only thinking of God. Then who will maintain your family? What will you do for the family?' Sometimes he argued with them. 'What is this family given me? Why should I forget God? This is the real thing, what I am doing. You cannot realize what I am doing.'" On a visit to Calcutta, Abai stayed at the home of his father-in-law, where he was given his own room. When his wife served him dinner, he noticed everything had been purchased from the market. "How is this?" he asked. So it was all, take out to go. "The cook is sick today," Radharani replied. Abai thought, it's better that we not live here at the house of her father, or else she will be spoiled even more. So he moved his family to a new address on Chaitla Street, where he sometimes stayed with his family for a few months, writing articles and doing a minimal amount of business. But most of the time he stayed in Allahabad. In Allahabad, Abai, now 54, lived like a vanaprastha, or one who has retired from family life. He was indifferent to the activities of family and business, though his children were grown. Activities a family man generally considers his prime objectives of responsibility and happiness. In his writings, Abai had several times discussed the 4 ashrams, or spiritual divisions of Vedic society: brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. In the first division, the brahmachari ashram, a young boy's parents sent him to the place of the guru, or the gurukula, where he lives a simple life, studying the Vedic literature under the guidance of his guru. Thus, in his childhood and youth, he learned the principles of austerity and spiritual knowledge that form the basis for his entire life. The parents are the first guru for the child also. If there's no gurukula available, then the parents, they have to do like that. At age 21, the brahmachari may take a wife and thus enter the next ashram, the grihastha ashram. Or, like Bhaktivedanta Saraswati, he may choose to remain a lifelong brahmachari. In his boyhood, Abai had remained celibate and imbibed the principles of devotion to Krishna from his father and mother. Although he had lived at home, his upbringing had been the equivalent of brahmachari life. Although he lived at home, his upbringing had been the equivalent of brahmachari life. And by marriage, at the age of 21, he had entered the grihastha ashram at the appropriate age. Gaur Mahan's example had shown Abai how to remain a devotee of Krishna even in family life. And as Vaishnavas, Abai and his wife had avoided the excesses of materialistic household life. At 50, a man is supposed to retire from his family activities, and this stage is called vanaprastha. In the vanaprastha ashram, both man and wife agree to abstain from further sexual contact. They may continue living together, but the emphasis is on spiritual partnership. As vanaprasthas, they may travel together on pilgrimage to the holy places in India, preparing for their inevitable departure from the material world. Thus, the Vedic ashrams, after allowing one to fulfill material life, enable one to end the cycle of repeated birth and death and attain the eternal spiritual world. A man of 50 should be able to see by his aging body that inevitable death is approaching, and he should have the good sense to prepare. He should become a prepper. In the final division, the sannyasa ashram, the man places his wife in the care of a grown son or daughter and fully dedicates himself to serving the Supreme Lord. Formerly, the sannyasa ashram meant a solitary life of penances in the Himalayas. But in the Gaudiya Vaishnava line, Srila Bhaktivedanta has emphasized preaching. Although Bai had not formally defined his status within the 4 ashrams, he appeared to be living more as a vanaprastha than a grihastha. He saw his business failures and his distasteful family situation as Krishna's blessings, freeing him from family responsibilities and turning him wholeheartedly towards executing Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati's order to preach. And Prabhupada, it was Prabhupada, it's time for Prabhupada to take a wife. He had his eye on someone, very beautiful, and he was attracted to another woman. His father said, no, I've chosen this one. She's a simple girl. She'll serve you nicely. You take this one. It'll be easier for you later if you take this one. You take that one and become too attached. entangled. So this is something I never knew. The Prabhupada, in Vedic culture, it's possible to have more than one wife. Bhaktivedanta had 2 wives and 13 children. This is possible. If you can maintain them both, it's possible. And so Abai decided he was going to get the other one too. He'd have both of them. And he was already starting to make arrangements to propose to get the other one too. He'd take his father's one. Yes, thank you, I'd take her. But I'm going to still go after it. And his father said, don't do it. No, don't do it. Just do this simple, like this. It'll be easier for you later. So he's seeing the wisdom of his father. He saw his business failures and his distasteful family situation as Krishna's blessings, freeing him from family responsibilities and turning him wholeheartedly toward executing Bhaktisiddhanta's order to preach. So they had 5 children. They were grown-up sons. One of them's name was Vrindavana. I don't know the other ones, not mentioned here. And the grown-up sons, they're taking over the business, apparently. And they took care of the mother. And Prabhupada is, you do what you want. And he's writing and preparing for sannyas. In Allahabad, Abai managed to save enough money to revive the printing of Back to Godhead. And in February 1952, from his editorial office and home, at 57B Canning Road, the first issue in 8 years appeared. Where was I in 1952? I was born in 47. I was 5 years old. My parents had just bought a house in the suburbs of Boston. I was 5 years old. And I remember lying in bed at night, looking out the window. I could see the stars from my room. And asking, when can I go home? When can I go home? I want to go home. Please, can you come and get me? I want to go home. So there's Prabhupada, 1952. And there I am, 1952. Hare Krishna. As before, he did everything himself. All the writing, typing, editing, meeting with the printer, and finally, distributing the copies by hand, as well as mailing them to respectable leaders throughout India. This, he felt, was the real purpose of living in Allahabad or anywhere. This was the best use of money, the purpose of human life, to engage fully in glorifying the Supreme Lord. Other things were temporary and would soon be lost. When he visited his family in Calcutta, old friends would gather in his room, and he would preach and give classes on Bhagavad Gita. Abai invited his wife and family to take part in these discussions, but they would resolutely sit in an upstairs room taking tea, as if in defiance of his preaching. Abai was supporting them. He was still associating with them, but he was bent on preaching, and they were not making it attractive for him to do so within the family. If there were to be family life for Abai, then his wife and sons would have to recognize and rejoice in the fact that he was becoming a full-fledged preacher. They would have to understand that his life concern was to serve his spiritual master's mission. They could not simply ignore his transformation. They could not insist that he was simply an ordinary man. Abai continued to try to draw his wife in, hoping she would gradually follow him in the preacher's life. But she had not the slightest interest in her husband's preaching. And why should he spend his days worrying about family, chemicals, and money? Let his relatives criticize. But Back to Godhead was the real service he could offer to the whole family of mankind. Madhavendra Puri, a great spiritual preceptor and predecessor of Lord Chaitanya, had written about the devotees' indifference to worldly criticism. So this is an excerpt Madhavendra Puri wrote. O demigods and forefathers, please excuse me. I'm unable to perform any more offerings for your pleasure. Now I have decided to free myself from all reactions to sins, simply by remembering anywhere and everywhere the great descendant of Yadu and the great enemy of Kamsa, Lord Krishna. I think that this is sufficient for me. So what is the use of further endeavors? Let the sharp moralist accuse me of being illusioned. I do not mind. Experts in Vedic activities may slander me as being misled. Friends and relatives may call me frustrated. My brothers may call me a fool. The wealthy Mammonites may point me out as mad. And the learned philosophers may assert that I'm much too proud. Still, my mind does not budge an inch from the determination to serve the lotus feet of Govinda, though I am unable to do it. Like Lord Chaitanya prays, "Oh my Lord, you all the potencies in your holy name alone, and I'm so unfortunate, I have no attraction for chanting your holy names." Krishna. So the biographer continues, why should he waste time with petty family problems when he held answers to the problems of India and the world? As a knower of Bhagavad Gita, he felt that his first obligation was to offer solutions to the complex crises of war, hunger, immorality, and crime, all symptoms all symptoms of godlessness. As if dedicating himself to such work meant that other less responsibilities suffered, there was no loss. Hare Krishna. So there's another page or so, and that was the end. It'd be the end of the chapter. So let's go through to the end. In March 1952, Abhay published another issue of Back to Godhead. It was dedicated mostly to a biographical article Abhay had written about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and his father, Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So this is this next issue in 1952. This is an excerpt. He, Bhaktivedanta Thakur, vehemently protested against the principles of those pseudo-transcendentalists now passing in the name of Lord Chaitanya. He initiated the reformatory movement by literary contributions while he still engaged in a high government office. During his householder life and serving as a magistrate, he wrote books of various descriptions in Bengali, English, Sanskrit, etc., to present an actual picture of pure devotional activities to Lord Chaitanya. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj got inspiration from his very childhood all about Srila Thakur Bhaktivinoda's movement. He worked as the private secretary of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and as such, Bhaktivinoda Thakur gave him, Srila Saraswati Thakur, the transcendental power of attorney to espouse the cause of Lord Chaitanya. He passed the torch, tossed the ball. And so, after Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's departure, Srila Saraswati Thakur took up reins of that reformatory movement. Absorbed in producing his monthly journal, Abai went about his other activities only superficially. Sometimes he traveled on business or, taking the night train from Allahabad to Calcutta, visited his family. When his compartment was not crowded, he would turn on a light while others slept. Riding a night train provided a good opportunity to think or even write. Sometimes he would sleep for a few hours and then sit up again and look out the window to see only night and the reflected lights of the train compartment shining back at him, the windows reflecting his face. Halfway through the 12-hour journey, the sky would lighten, turning from gray to light blue, and the first white clouds would appear in the sky. He could see lights in the towns and hear the train horn warning. When the train slowed and stopped at a station, tea vendors would walk alongside the train windows yelling, "Chai, chai, chai." Their loud sing-song din filling the ears with chai, and chai filling the air with its aroma as hundreds of passengers sipped their morning tea. During his more than 20 years of extensive train travel, Abai had noticed, so Prabhupada was used to traveling. He traveled a lot his whole life. He was on a train, and then later, when he's preaching, he's on airplanes. So traveling was not something he was unfamiliar with. But here, he hasn't left India yet. During his more than 20 years of extensive train travel, Abai had noticed more and more people smoking cigarettes and more women traveling alone. India was becoming westernized. And the national leaders were paving the way, the blind leading the blind. That must have been, They wanted the kingdom of God without God. They wanted a progressive, industrialized India without Krishna. From the windows he could see large fields being left uncultivated, and yet people were hungry. Abai would sometimes read a newspaper and cut out an article that seemed to warrant a reply in Back to Godhead, or that sparked an idea for an essay. He would deliberate over how to approach people for assistance, whom to approach, and how to start a society of Krishna-conscious devotees. People not only in India, but all over the world could take to Krishna consciousness. The Chaitanya Bhagavat had predicted that the name of Lord Chaitanya would one day be known in every town and village. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had wanted that. So nothing has happened yet. This is only 80 years ago. Nothing has happened. Is it 80? Yeah, I think 80 years ago. 1952. And this is 2022. 52. Oh, my math. 1952 from 2020 to 70? 70 years? Chaitanya Bhagavat had predicted that the name of Lord Chaitanya would one day be known in every town and village. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had wanted that. He had sent preachers to England, but they had only gained a protocol visit with the royalty, stood in line, bowed before the crown, and then came back to India without effecting any change in Western people. Abai thought about sending Back to Godhead abroad. His agents, Backer, Spink, and Company, had contacts in America and Europe. People read English all over the world, and some of them would surely appreciate the ideas from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. This was what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had wanted. Krishna consciousness was not for India alone. It was India's greatest gift, and it was for everyone. Hare Krishna. Jai. Not chai. Jai. So that's the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7 is where Prabhupada tries to start a society for Krishna consciousness in India. And it's the League of Devotees. And we'll see that also fails. He's supposed to come to the West. Krishna. He's thinking he can do it out of India. You know, send magazines, these publishers will distribute the literature. He has to come personally. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So I'm like 5 years old, and Prabhupada's trying to get here. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Krishna! Oh my goodness. Woo! Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's Prabhupada. He's carrying the Bhaktivedanta beach, the seed of devotion. He's trying to plant it. It wasn't until he comes to the West that he finds fertile ground. And the seed germinates and sprouts. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.